Hello, I'm Msgr Jim Lisante. Today on Personally Speaking, I'll be joined by one of the best long-distance runners in the world, Olympic champion Galen Rupp. Please stay with us. Hello and welcome to Personally Speaking. I'm your host, Msgr Jim Lisante. An American long-distance runner and Olympic champion, Galen Rupp, joins me now. In 2016, Galen won the bronze medal in the men's marathon in Rio de Janeiro, and he won the silver medal in the men's 10,000 meters in London in 2012. He's also an 11-time national distance running champion who won the Chicago Marathon in 2017 and the Prague Marathon in 2018. Galen Rupp attended Central Catholic High School in Portland, Oregon. In Galen's freshman year, running legend Alberto Salazar became Central High School's running coach. Alberto would become Galen's mentor, not just in running, but in his Catholic faith. And in fact, he was Galen's confirmation sponsor. Galen met his wife, Kira, at the University of Oregon, where she was also a competitive runner, and they're the parents of 4 young children. Galen recites the Rosary while running and says his faith life keeps him anchored. He's here with us today to talk about his life, his career, his marriage and family, and the importance of his Catholic faith. Joining me now, I'm so delighted to welcome to Personally Speaking, Olympic champion Galen Rupp. Galen, you are now, even though you look supremely young, you are yourself a daddy 4 times over, right? And I'm
Correct.
wondering, when you look back on your earlier life, your parents, what did they do right in raising you that you would hope to do with your kids?
I think the biggest thing is just, I knew I was loved unconditionally, from the get-go. They always made sure they told me that every day. And, as I got older, it didn't matter what I did or, what I didn't do. I always knew that I was loved. And at the heart of everything, when you have that type of support, it's the greatest thing ever. I was really fortunate that both my parents were, played such a big part in my life, and they were always there for me. And that was the biggest thing I can think of growing up that I hope to do with my kids too.
No matter what.
Absolutely.
And were you much of a challenge? Were you hard to love?
I probably have my moments for sure. But yeah, going through that myself now with kids, I think that's a common thing, especially with COVID being locked up for a while, and indoors a lot. Everybody has their moments, but yeah, they're the best. I have so much fun being a dad, and I wouldn't trade it for anything.
Galen, how, especially when you have these little children and your faith and your values are important to you, have you and your wife figured out what's the best way that we can communicate what we treasure to these kids we treasure?
We've both, my wife and I have always been big on, just your actions, actions speak louder than words, and really, living your faith and doing that. Obviously there's a place for, talking about it and preaching about it. But, if you don't live it and follow through, I think that's the best way that you can reinforce your values when your kids see it, and they're seeing you do it on a daily basis, and how you handle different things and the way you do, you just go about living your life. When they see that regularly, I think that's the best thing that you could do as a parent, to reinforce those values. And, I'm really lucky that my wife, she's unbelievable. She's much more patient than I am, I think, with a lot of this. And, I try to kind of follow her lead on a lot, because she's just an unbelievable woman and does the greatest job of really exemplifying, our values and what we believe in.
Well, Galen, that's a perfect segue into what I wanted to ask you next. About every year, I would say I celebrate close to 100 weddings every year. And to do a good job at preaching, I regularly ask every couple I get to do their wedding, hey, write me an essay on why of the billion people out there you could marry, why is this the one? How did you come to decide this woman is the one for me?
Oh, I mean, I think I kind of had a hunch really early on, and it was weird. I actually remember, talking to my mom about it, and I was in church actually. And, she kind of asked me, do you think that Kira might be the one? And I was like, just kind of smiled, and, I think she knew, but but she's just the most kind, caring person, to everybody. And it was something that, her personality, we chat each other, but she's just the most loving, supportive person. I could have dreamed to marry. And so it was a match made in heaven, I guess. But yeah, I think anybody that's married, when you know, and I knew pretty early.
Maybe this is a harder question. Do you have any idea what she saw in you that made her say, he's the one for me?
That's probably the better question for sure. You'd have to ask her that.
It'd be interesting to get her perspective on the whole thing.
Yeah.
One of the things you've been upfront about is, and you remind me a little bit from that point of view of Amy Coney Barrett, the woman they just named to the Supreme Court. She's kind of this unapologetic believer, unapologetic Catholic. You too, you don't seem to make any apologies for, hey, this is who I am. I'm a man of faith. Take it or leave it. Where does the courage to be upfront about your faith come from?
It's like you said, it's always been such a really important part of my life. My parents started me off from kindergarten at All Saints School here in Portland, Oregon. And, so, I grew up, going to mass and obviously going to Catholic school. I went to Central Catholic High School and, and then I went on to the University of Oregon, but it's just, I really was a little uncomfortable about it, I guess, when I was younger. And not that I was ashamed or anything like that, but just, I never wanted to come off as, just this, really preachy or holier than thou. And I kind of kept it to myself, but more. But as I got older, I think I became more comfortable with it and more talking about it is what I mean. And, that was one of the things. And, I talked a lot to my priest and, my confirmation sponsor and all that stuff. And, I think that I feel more of an obligation now, I think, to speak out about it and just share my experience. People can take with that what they want, but again, it's something that has been such a huge part of my life, really from the get-go. And as I've gotten older, it's become more. And that's one of the things I always loved about Catholicism was, you start out with baptism and, baptize our kids, but, you have that choice when you get older to grow in and go through it with confirmation. And, it's more of something that is your own choice. It's not something that, I was just raised or somebody else forced this on me. And, and so going through that process and really, I grew a lot, I would say in my faith, especially in high school and as I got older in college. It is such a huge part, in what I do. I always thought that I struggled at times just being, an athlete because it's what I'm doing really important, in the grand scheme of things. I play a game, but it's kind of funny, we aren't able to go to mass right now, but we watch it every Sunday. Our church, Holy Trinity, they stream it online, and Father Dave Gutman just gave an awesome sermon, this last Sunday talking about, the parable with the talents and just he really talked about living your life with gusto and going for it and doing the things you're good at and not being apologetic about it, and that's a great way, and that's really what that parable was trying to say, is don't just bury that stuff, but go out and share all those gifts that God's given you with the world and do it to the fullest. And that really, for me, it kind of made it look like what I'm doing, maybe that's my talent and what I'm good at. And so, as long as I always do it, glorifying God and making sure that, he's at the center of it, it's not for selfish reasons or, personal glory, any of that stuff. It was kind of cool. So, it really fit in with what I'm doing, I guess.
I think it's a wonderful witness, Galen, and I'm hearing some delightful sound effects in the background there.
Yeah, we got a 1-year-old that crept in. My wife just grabbed it. So
I think I'm supposed to interview the baby next.
Yeah, he's just babbling right now, so you probably wouldn't get any.
I understand babble.
Yeah.
There's a guy, Joe Drape. He writes for the New York Times, the sports section, and he's written a book about how they make saints in the Catholic Church. But I said to him in our earlier interview, Joe, how come when I interview politicians and actors and even some writers, they kind of dance around faith so often, but when Drew Brees is our guest or Derek Jeter or one of those people, Mark Teixeira, they're like right out front about this is who I am, this is what I believe. Do you find with athletes that they're given to that kind of honesty, that kind of straightforwardness?
Yeah, definitely. And I think, I think being a great athlete, being great at whatever you do, it's ultimately so much about being comfortable, with yourself and, making decisions and being decisive. And, whether you're unapologetic about it or not, I think it's just that confidence, and comfort in what you're doing and who you are.
Yeah.
You can't be successful, I don't think, in any walk of life if you don't. And so, if your faith is a big part of it, as it is with me, and it sounds like with some of those other athletes you mentioned, I don't see a problem with saying that. You should never be scared, or I always kind of thought you should never be ashamed, and having faith in God. That's kind of what having faith is, is really being out there and, not kind of caving into whatever you might worry about other people. You should be worried about what God believes and the big man upstairs thinks first and foremost.
There's an athlete years ago who I gotten to know well, Mark Bavaro, who was a Super Bowl champion with the New York Giants. And when he would catch the ball, he was tight end, he would, genuflect and say a prayer. And Sports Illustrated had an editorial against him one time saying, Mr. Bavaro, keep your faith to yourself. And I said to him, how do you feel about that? And he said, I'm going to die, and I'm not going to have to stand before Sports Illustrated someday, but I will stand before my God. So that's who I'm going to answer to, and no one else, And I think you're effectively saying the same thing. Let me ask you, because one of our other guests a few years ago, I realized only recently in reading about you, is your confirmation sponsor. We had Alberto. And I mentioned that because I was so moved by the sincerity and authenticity of his faith. What has he meant for you as not just coach, but as a man of faith?
I mean, he's always put his faith first, and I'm sure you got that with talking with him, and ever when he was working with me in high school and even after that, it was always, he preached that more than anything. He was a great coach, but above all else, he thought, especially with me, he said, I'm a failure if I don't get you to, grow in your faith and make sure that that's the center of everything. This athletic stuff is great. But he always put such an emphasis on that. And, he was the coach at Central Catholic High School. That's where we met. And, I still say the same prayer, that we said in high school back then. Just a real simple one, but that was always a common thing. Every time before I raced, going back to high school, college, and professionally, we always said a prayer together when we were working with each other. And, that was the last thing that we always did before I left to go to the starting line, when he was my coach. So, it was something that it's still stuck with me. I still do it, privately on my own, before I head out to the start of a race. But it's a good little reminder, I think, before I go to the starting line, that, always remember why you're doing this and to keep God at the center of it, and it's just, it always calms me down. I get a lot of nerves before you head to the race, but, for whatever reason, saying that short little prayer beforehand has always been something that, just gets me in the right frame of mind. And it's literally the last thing I do or say before the start.
Galen Rupp is our guest for our guests. And just to point out, I think probably, Galen, for most people, the most famous film, obviously, about running is Chariots of Fire. And Eric Liddell, the Olympic champion, has that great line where he says, when I run, I feel God's pleasure. Can you turn running into a spiritual experience?
Definitely. I've said this before, but, I run the marathon now. I started out as a track runner, but, you got a lot of time to think when you're out there for 26.2 miles. And so, a real common thing for me is, I say the rosary when I'm running. I kind of just go, a friend of mine, Father Pat, Pat Conway from Georgetown. And I think he was with the House of Representatives. I know he was the chaplain there, but, he was joking around about the Five-Finger Rosary. And so, you kind of go through your fingers. And so, sometimes you see me, moving my fingers, my thumb across.
Right.
It's just me counting, through the decades and all that. But that's always been something that's really been calming for me. It puts me in a great state of mind. And, it's almost a meditative thing, when I'm running, and especially when I'm out there for a long time by myself. I pray a lot, and it's not for, let me win this race or do anything.
Right.
It's just, let me do my best to glorify you, and whatever the result is, it is. But I don't God's not playing favorites. He's not saying, I want this person to win over this person. I think, he always wants us all to do our best and, just give it our all. That's the only way that you're really using your talents to the fullest. And, so that's really what I do a lot. And, I just always usually make the sign of a cross, when I finish every race. I did it at the Olympics in 2016. And, I think there's a picture of me doing that. And there's a lot of other times, ever since then, it's always right before I cross the finish line. It's just, thank you for helping me through this, keeping me healthy, and allowing me to do my best. And, it's definitely a spiritual thing, getting out there and competing on the starting line on the roads.
Galen, many years ago, when John Paul was still the Pope, he twice called religious leaders from around the world to pray in Assisi. And he said, we can all learn from each other. There's a complementary nature to different faiths. And I mentioned that because one of the most powerful books for me was the book Like Buddha, Like Christ, where they parallel the teachings of Buddha, the teachings of Christ. I mentioned that because I was intrigued by your involvement with Tai Chi. And what is Tai Chi?
It's just, the best way to explain to me was it's just slow moving energy, and a lot of it is just about, really, being in your body and being comfortable and being very aware, of everything that's going on. And obviously, there's a lot of stuff with breathing and, but that's kind of in a nutshell, what it is just that slow moving energy, taking your time to be in control and really learning to be completely within yourself. And, I think that, obviously it's got a lot more roots, with Buddhism and things like that. But, it's still something that I feel, I've correlated a lot, to my Catholic faith and just really, it helps you focus. It helps you be totally, block all this noise. We have so many distractions right now with, all phones and TV, there's just a million things constantly. And so, just taking some time to be, to be quiet, a quiet place and be within yourself. I think those are things that certainly, help with Catholicism as well. And, you're able to, get into deeper prayer, more focused prayer and more, singular intent when you're doing that stuff, when you learn to be more within yourself and just be 100% focused on the present and what's going on. So it's certainly, it's been kind of cool. I think it's important to always branch out and, be looking and reading, about different areas, even if they might seem, at first glance, a little contradictory. You can often learn a lot. And so it's, I've been enjoying it.
I like it. Galen Rupp is our guest. And Galen, I forgot to ask you, I wanted to ask you right out of the bat here. What kind of name is that? And how did you get that name?
I have no idea. My parents just, when I asked them, they just said, they were looking through the names. They went through a lot and both of them just thought it stuck out to each of them. And so they just said that they knew, I don't think there's definitely no family history or significance with that at all. Yeah.
I thought maybe there's some great grandfather named Galen. No, you're the first and only.
Not at all. Yeah.
What's the ethnic background of mommy and daddy?
My dad is I would say he's mostly German, German descent, and my mom is kind of split with Irish and German. My grandma on my mom's side, who I'm really close with, she's still going strong. She got dual citizenship, so she's an Irish citizen. Her dad came over, and then they settled, on the West Coast, and then my grandpa, he's very, very German. His mom, I think, came over from Germany, and I don't think she spoke a whole lot of English. I can't remember if that was his mom or his grandma, but one of the two. So it's pretty split between those two.
Now, how about the ethnic background of your wife?
She's kind of all over. I have to ask her.
So those kids
they're Irish for sure. No, they've got a lot of Irish blood in them. And I can't remember the second one. Yeah.
So those kids are going to be those kids are a beautiful blend. Then Yeah. I want to share with our listeners and talking to Galen today. Someone who knew him pretty well, a guy named Dave Frank, one of his coaches, talks about him this way. He says he's a great student, and he wasn't talking just about his academics, because he says he knows to be grateful. He knows to thank people. He's a humble man, an honest man, a caring man. Here's what I'm wondering. Galen, you're this Olympic champion, and I would imagine there are temptations to be very ego-centered. Obviously, by what the coach is saying here, that hasn't driven your life. So what keeps you rooted? What keeps you with a sense of I'm glad that God gave me this gift, but I'm not going to let it go to my head?
I don't know. I think obviously the way I was raised, my parents played a huge part of that. My grandparents are huge role models of mine. I mentioned my grandma and my grandpa too. They're such hardworking, down to earth, real blue collar people. And they just, I remember, my grandpa was a lawyer, and my grandma did a lot of work, with the courts, and they had a lot of, people stay with them over the years, a lot of kids that had gotten into a little bit of trouble or were in bad situations. They lived with them, and they took them in and welcomed them with open arms. And,
Wow.
that's just the kind of people they are. My grandma especially is a real strong Catholic. And, always taught me about St. Jude, and, that was always, I think, one of her favorite saints. And, we'd say the novena if things were really bad, you got lost causes. I think just growing up in that environment, that was just the way I was raised. And since I've gotten married, my wife is awesome. One of the things I love about her is that, she's very down to earth too. And anytime, there's just things start getting to my head at all, she's the first person to bring me back down and remind me. And so just having people like that I've surrounded myself with and been fortunate to have in my life from the get-go, they certainly keep you grounded, but, it's just the way that they all live, it's a huge influence on me, and it still is, and I just feel real fortunate to, especially with my marriage and stuff, to have someone like that who lives it. She doesn't talk about it a lot. She lives it daily. And that's for me, one of the biggest sources of, inspiration, is just seeing that and how she lives her life. It's huge. So, I think just surround yourself with good people, and obviously faith plays a big part in that. When it's you put God first, in everything that you do and in your thoughts. It's hard to get too big on yourself when that is always kind of looming over over everything else.
When you realize everything comes from Him, Galen, as you're talking about the family and friends that surround you, it sounds like they long ago learned to live faith and certainly bring it to bear in church, but then take it outside of church and make it real in the real world. And so those are your models. What a great inspiration. Now, for those who don't know, Galen Rupp also had a kind of challenging experience. You got this great gift, right? The ability to run and to run well. But then you get injured and you're off the field for a bit. Did you have any kind of arguments with God about, hey, why would you give me this gift only to seemingly limit it? Like, how was the dialogue and prayer with God during the times when you weren't able to run?
It's still great. Obviously there were times where I get frustrated. But I'm a big believer in, there's a reason for everything, and who am I to ever question, what God's will is or what He has planned. Things might not always be clear in the instance, when they happen. Bad things happen to everybody, but I still was, honestly, the first thing was just still gratitude that I was healthy for so long. And, I had no doubt that I was going to get through this, or if I wasn't, there was a reason for that. And, I say it all the time, it's you send your problems up to God. That's a real powerful thing. And it helps you get through so much when you really, and He always welcomes that. I think that's part of the power of prayer and your faith is, if you don't have to take all this on by yourself. You've got someone who's always on your side, always loving, always going to forgive, and always behind you. And so, it's just about, what can you do? That's always been my mindset with this stuff. Whenever something bad happens, is all right, what are you going to do about it? It's done. You can't take back the past. You can't take back, whatever's happened. But again, you keep your faith and you put it in God's hands, and you just obviously spend a lot of time in prayer and reflection, but you move forward and you keep working towards whatever it is. And, if you have that mindset and that attitude, there's nothing you can't get through and can't accomplish. And, if life throws you a curveball and, you end up going in a different direction for whatever reason, I believe there's a purpose behind that and a reason why that stuff happens. So it's just, it's always important to keep that. And, if you don't have faith in those dark times, that's really what it's about. It's one of the things that, I was taught from a young age is it's easy to have faith. It's easy when things are going great and everything's all rosy, to be thankful and say, oh, thanks for all this great
Right.
blessings that I have in my life. But it's those times when things are challenging, that you really need it the most. And that's a true test. I'm never gonna blame, certainly never blame God for any problems that I have and blame, others. It's just, how am I going to get through it? And you look forward, and that's a conscious choice. Everybody has that power within them to think that way.
I want to thank Galen Rupp for being with us. He's not just this Olympic champion, but to me, he represents a point of view of just live your life in God's grace and leave it up to Him. You are, to me, the walking embodiment of that prayer we talk about, the meditation footprints. The man walks next to me every step of my life, and there are going to be times in life when I can't even take the next step, and that's when He carries me when I cannot carry myself. And living that way is a wonderful way to live, living as God's companion and friend, but also allowing Him to carry us when we can't carry ourselves. Galen, thank you for not apologizing for your faith, for the love you have for your family, your wife, your children, and everyone else who's been important to you in your life. You're really a beautiful witness to the power of trusting in God, and I'm so grateful for you for sharing that with the people who listen to a show like Personally Speaking. Praying for you and hoping for only good things in the days ahead. All right?
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me. No, this was awesome. God bless.
As we end today's program, I want to thank all of you for being with us. If you have any questions or comments about the show, you can send them to me through my website, which is www.closeencountertv.com. All one word, closeencountertv.com. To listen to our Personally Speaking podcast with some of our most recent shows, please go to YouTube and search under Personally Speaking with Msgr Jim Lisante and subscribe. Personally Speaking is also available as a podcast on Apple Podcasts, iHeart, and Spotify. You can also listen to past episodes by going to www.ollmp.org, ollmp.org, and you get not only recent shows, but also Msgr Jim's weekly homilies. I'm privileged to serve as host and executive producer of Personally Speaking. Our producer is Lisa Jadovitz, and thank you all so much for being with us. We'll be with you again next time on Personally Speaking.